Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2006 musical crime drama titled Idlewild. Now, Idlewild runs for 2 hours and 1 minute long. It is directed by Bryan Barber. It is also written by Bryan Barber. It is produced by Charles Roven and Robert Goralnik. The score was done by Outcast and John Debney. The cinematography was done by Pascal Rabot, and the editing was done by Anne Goursand. And the stars of the movie are Outcast members Andre 3000 Benjamin and Antoine Big Boy Patton. The other star members include Paula Patton, Terence Howard, Faison Love, Melinda Williams, I should say. Sorry about that. Cicely Tyson, Jackie Long, Macy Gray, Ben Vereen, Paula J. Parker, Bobby J. Thompson, Patti LaBelle, Ving Rhames, and Karen Dyer. Now to all those from a younger generation of mine who still thinks that the 1990s is synonymous with ancient history, it's very complex telling a story that was set in the Great Depression Prohibition area, situated in a small town of Idlewild, Georgia. So we have newcomer movie director Bryan Barber, who of course has directed several music videos for the band Outkast. He thought he found the perfect solution. First, grab a bunch of singing sensations and provide a soundtrack that doesn't depend on the authentic sounds of jazz and blues, but instead replace the genre of music to hip hop, to combine, authentic big band era music, juxtapose it together with hip hop music, and you have a sound that could very much rival that of Baz Luhrmann and his other period piece type movies, like Chicago, Moulin Rouge, The Great Gatsby, and so forth. It's got that very similar sound to it. Do I think it's a good idea? Well, of course not. As my grandfather, he was a jazz musician, and I think that if you want a good, solid, authentic story set in the time period, the music must match the time period. Who cares what the millennials think of the music? It just does not seem to fit right to put hip hop music at a time when hip hop music was not even in existence in that time period. It's okay to put in a little Charlie Bird Parker or Louis Armstrong or Cab Calloway and the like into this music because that was the music of the Prohibition era. But since, yes, Bryan Barber has directed Outkast music videos, and the Outkast are an R&B blues band and has a more modern contemporary sound to their genre of music. They think that it's okay, but to me, I mean, I'm not like I'm insulted by it, but it just seems like it's a major anachronism that that's not necessary. Sadly, even though Barber provides some very nifty set pieces, an important staple was missing in action here. The script was very spotty in detail, and it feels very loosely attached here. It seemed like the main emphasis was mostly on just dance and song numbers as opposed to actual, real, in depth storytelling. I mean, there's a lot of great story to be told, but it's very loosely drawn that could have done some more tweaking, some more emphasis. But instead, it felt like just an extended long music video. The cliches are definitely aplenty, and the transitions can be quite incongruent. Although I can appreciate Barber for his efforts as a director, he's still in heavy need of improvement when writing scripts. Okay, so Idlewild just doesn't have enough songs to actually pass off as a musical. With a musical, the music songs have to sort of emphasize more than the story itself. But for a musical, you have to have a combination of story. I mean, sure, the songs definitely will have to outweigh the dialogue. Yes, that's right. But there's very little story and there's very little dialogue, but also at the same time, there's very little musical numbers. I mean, it sounds like we're seeing a whole montage or a whole motif of music videos all wrapped into one, and there's like 5 songs at maximum in this movie. So it's not, a full musical because musicals usually have about maybe 10 songs at the most. And they all have to sort of follow along with a tightly woven story. This story is too loose. So that's kind of like what really brings down this movie. And these 5 songs, which in total last for about 15 minutes, and the musical numbers, 3 of them are situated at the club, even though, they're catchy and the tempo is very uplifting. But once again, it falls under the vernacular of all style with very little substance. The musical numbers feel like I'm in a music video than watching an actual movie. I mean, it's no surprise at that because Barber's first claim to fame was directing videos for outcasts, who are the stars in this vehicle. The scenery and the photography look authentic, and the costumes were stylish for the time period, and the lingo seems to be quite apropos. But the hip hop score can be very distracting. It just doesn't feel like a period piece at times. Just a whole big, long 2 hour music video with a mishmash of songs in a little medley, so to speak. If there is a story to it, it goes a little something like this. The story centers around the lives of 2 friends who have been buddies since youth. We have a character named Percival, played by Andre 3000 Benjamin, and his friend, his name is Rooster, played by Antoine Big Boy Patton, and they've known each other since childhood, but they have took separate avenues in their life. Is it for better, for worse? Well, at least it's kind of believable in the sense that, there are good days they have and they have bad days. But they each, take separate paths in life, even though they still see each other frequently. Let's see. Percival, as an adult, he becomes a dedicated worker at a mortuary with his father, Percy Sr., played by musical legend, dance legend, a guy who's been in the musical scenes in the theaters. He's been on stage since forever, and I'm talking about the legendary Ben Vereen. So he's working at his father's mortuary, but it's just not really like something he really wants to do. seems more passionate about working at the music club that is known as the church, which is anything but the House of Holy. And the church is run by his friend Rooster, who is the main act there. And he also has a future as an owner whenever the current owner, Ace, played by Faison Love, decides to step down. Now, even though Rooster is married with 5 children, he's still an inebriate and he is also a philanderer. So while Percival is single and is for the taking, he does develop some interest in the new attraction star, and her name is Angel, played by Paula Patton. So the plot eventually starts to thicken when a local gangster named Trumpy, played by Terence Howard, enters the fray and kills his boss, Spats, played by Ving Rhames, and then assassinates Ace, leaving the church at the hands of Rooster, while Trumpy supplies him with moonshine. The duo despise each other, and a conflict is put in inescapable results. Trumpy, of course, he wants to take over the church. And let's face it, he is the main bad guy. Now, this is kind of interesting here. We will talk a little bit more about the characters right now. Let's talk about the performances. The performances were overall really good, though I didn't think there wasn't really anything special. Now, I was actually quite impressed by the performance of the outcast. I thought Benjamin and Patton, who don't have a lot of acting credits on their resume, they still managed to give it their all, and they never feel like upstaged by the more established performers who also seem to excel in their respective roles. Uh, I thought they did pretty good, for guys who don't have much acting experience. They're musicians by trade, and having them, perform with not a solid, strong resume in acting, they did pretty good. Especially, I think Big Boy was a little bit better than Andre 3000. Andre 3000, there are parts about him where he felt a little uncomfortable or not that confident in himself, because that's even through the music scenes too, he also kind of felt uncomfortable. In fact, I think some of his best scenes are when he's working at the mortuary. uh, One of the more memorable scenes I remember seeing was when he was there was a bit of a distracting scene where near the end he's like serenading to a dead corpse, which was a little uncomfortable, and I was a little ill at ease, but it was still very effective. But let's face it, I thought Big Boy was the better of the two. He really just nailed it to perfection. Andre 3000, he was okay, but he was still not at his comfort zone, even in the music scenes, which has actually taken me a bit by surprise. But he was still good, though. I actually thought that the real standout performance here was Paula Patton. She is amazing in her performance, and her breakout number is just extraordinary. But you also have great familiar faces here, like Ben Vereen, Patti LaBelle, Macy Gray, and Bill Nunn here. And although they did quite well in their respective roles, they really didn't really have much to exhibit that kind of held them back. I mean, their gifts weren't really utilized here, and I think that was a bit of a shame because especially that of Ben Vereen and Patti LaBelle. I mean, here you have it's a shame that we don't hear Patti LaBelle or Ben Vereen singing, which was something that I was expecting when watching this movie. I mean, I saw Ben Vereen in the credits and I was like, where's his dance numbers? Where are the scenes where he could show his just how dynamic he is as a performer who has been on the stage since his youth in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s? We didn't get a chance to see him show off what his true gifts are. He is a very talented performer. He's a singer, he's a dancer. He's been in musical numbers throughout the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, but we never got the chance to see him shine in his role. I mean, he was kind of playing off as a stern undertaker working mortician, and he did quite well, but that's not his true calling. His true calling is through singing and dance numbers, but we never get to see it. And I was kind of disappointed in that. Same could be said for the amazing soul singer of Patti LaBelle, who has a singing career that spans nearly 5 decades. But we never actually get to see her sing. And she's got like one of the most incredible voices. And that she's more than just voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir. No, she is more than just even that song alone, even though that is her most familiar song. But she's been a singer since the mid '60s, and yet we never got a chance to hear her. And she's got a career as a singer, lounge singer. She was with the Patti LaBelle and the Limelights, I think the name of the group was. I don't remember. But it was just an injustice that we never got to hear her amazing golden voice, which actually ends up making their roles a little bit wasted. So that kind of disappointed me a little bit. I mean, not to say that their performances were bad, but it just wasn't enough. I mean, they wanted more. I mean, I know the younger generation will probably say, "Oh, that they're too old." Excuse me, but enough of that nonsense. These guys are legends. They're treasured people. Okay. Sometimes these millennials should just put a stop to their ageist thoughts that these guys are old school. That's not cool. You know what's not cool is not them giving their chances to have their moment in the sun. That's not cool. And then let's see. Also, Terence Howard once again, he is the smooth, slick guy. I mean, he's the kind of guy. He is just such an amazing, versatile talent. This Terence Howard, I have to admit. I mean, the guy can play off a slick guy, whether he's playing a protagonist or an antagonist. This guy is the kind of guy who people pay attention to because he could just use his charm through anything. He can probably charm his way to a parking space. Like if he's traveling and riding and he's downtown and he can't find a parking space, he'll use his persuasion just to get in. I mean, he's just a naturally charming guy. He's the kind of guy who doesn't have to necessarily pay a toll to get through, to get across a bridge, or to get through to find a parking space at a bank. He's the kind of guy who would be like, he could probably get his money through the use of his charm and that he doesn't need a bank machine. The guy is just that kind of natural in charm, whether he's playing a hero, whether he's playing a villain. And here there's no exception. He is just that naturally charming Even though he is the top villain in this story, he is the evil dude in this story, but he makes the story all the more interesting because let's face it, in a story of this magnitude, we need a villain. We need somebody to get under your skin. We need somebody who has that thick coat, that sliminess, and he could pull it off. He's that kind of person who's like that. He's the kind of person who could probably sit at the front row of a theater and would ask the ushers to sit in the front row of the theater just by using his natural charm. That's just how amazing Terence Howard is. And here, he could have actually played off a villain character that was one dimensional, but still, Terence Howard could just still pull it off. Even though he didn't have a lot of screen time, his limited time on screen was enough to make your heart melt. And if he can do that, he could probably be. He is the definition of a smooth criminal. And in this movie, he is a smooth criminal here. Even though he killed a few people, principal characters in this movie. And the climax is just pure hectic. And it's so overwhelming, it's enough to make your head spin. Yeah, he's just that amazing. So for fans of the Outcast, this movie will be likely to be treasured. But the appeal is also quite puzzling. The tone can be very uncertain at times. The musical and fantasy elements lack in cohesion, especially when the gangster scenes come into play. Not only that, the talking liquor flask and the animated musical numbers, especially with the rooster, they seem to just not fit in at times. The movie is just way too serious in delivery, and the tragedy has no room for anything that's centered around spontaneous, jovial fantasy sequences. So, sure, it may be original in content, but familiarity seems to be inescapable. The product may be high in diversion, but there's nothing really that much special about the characters, the plot, or the story, which in the end makes this movie quite disposable. It didn't have to be that way. I think, like through better editing, more story into it. I'm not saying less musical numbers if they want. They should have had more musical numbers with a story going for it to have it into a good, solid musical. Or just make the musical stuff very brief. I think, with more experience as a film director and more experience in writing, Bryan Barber does have a future. But this movie is not going to give him that much. I'm not gonna deter his position. He put in a good effort for a first time movie director. And I think, he's got a bright future ahead. I just think of this movie almost as though as if it's like a poor man's Chicago. Being that it's a musical with very limited music, and it's a crime drama with very limited crime, and the fantasy elements just does not seem to blend in. And if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I have to give I have to give Idlewild a 6. So I guess this ends my rider review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. and I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Rodrider saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.